Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Hi, I'm Maria. I am the owner of Baffling Beads AT, a small shop over on Etsy for handmade beaded jewelry. And I also upload beading content like beading tutorials or videos about my small handmade business here on YouTube. And today it's time for me to teach you another basic beading technique if you want to. And it's going to be the herringbone stitch, which is actually my absolute favorite stitch. And it's one of the stitches I started beading with. If you go back the whole timeline on my Instagram feed, you will see that the first few bracelets I made were herringbone stitch bracelets and netting stitch bracelets. The herringbone stitch is not one of the easiest stitches or techniques, I would say, but it's a very pretty one. So I would say it's more like an intermediate stitch, but you get very pretty results from it using it. You don't need a ton of beads, you don't need any special designs to make it pretty, and that's why I find it very rewarding to know it and to use it. And to this day I love including it in my jewelry. So first I would like to show you some of my old bracelets that I made about 2 years ago, and then a few examples of how I use it today in my bracelets and my mainly hoop earrings. That way you can get some ideas how you could use it. And then you've also already learned the basics for all the upcoming herringbone stitch tutorials for my own designs. So these are some of my old examples from about 1.5 or 2 years ago. This is one of the very first ones I made. You can see that I only used one color and I made it with Miyuki Delica beads. And yeah, I made little beaded loops at the end, and I just stuck some jump rings in there or added a lobster clasp. So nothing super special, but I find them very pretty in these metallic colors. And they are super flexible, as you can see, not stiff at all. And yeah, you can make them as wide as you like. For this one I used a bead mix. Otherwise it's the same. And then I also started a very wide one, and I tried to make a color gradient with metallic and matte beads. I never finished it. And then this one is also a herringbone stitch, even though it looks a little different. Basically it's just bi-directional. So I made 2 strands of herringbone stitch, and then I turned one around basically, and then I weaved them into each other. I really like these, but I haven't quite figured out how to finish off these bracelets. That's why right now I don't sell them, but I think they are actually very pretty also. So this is a unicolored one, this is a bicolored one. Also in metallic colors, bronze and gold. Yeah, but the same problem with the ends. Maybe someday I will have a good idea. I hope so. And then this one was one of my very first filled herringbone stitches. So in this case it's filled with check beads. And I used Miyuki round beads for these, 11/0 and 15/0. And then later on I switched back to Miyuki Delica beads, but in this case I used pressed beads in the middle. So for these I started to add these wire guards at the end, which by now I always do because it's so much safer. And this one is one of the bracelets I currently sell in my shop because I really like the combination of fire polished check beads with Miyuki Delica beads, 11/0 and 15/0 round beads. I also add the wire guards, and they all come with an extension chain. And you can actually order them in the length you need in my shop, and they are all made to order. So these are some of my bracelet examples, and now I would like to show you some of my earrings I make with the herringbone stitch. So these are my Naomi hoop earrings. These are all made with the herringbone stitch, as you can see. I think to this day this is my absolute favorite design I made, even though it's pretty simple. Another earring design are my Ilapatra earrings. I also used color gradients in these. And you can clearly see the herringbone stitch along that circular finding. And then a short while ago I also made matching hoop earrings for my cobalt bracelets I just showed you. So here I used a filled herringbone stitch, as you can see. Here you have those super sparkly, fire polished check beads in between those herringbone stitch rows of beads. You can find my Coburn bracelets and all of these earrings in my Etsy shop, which is linked down below in the description box. But now I want to show you how to make a very simple herringbone stitch bracelet. Like in all the other tutorials, I will not disclose any of my color codes. I don't share all my information because I still want to sell my own jewelry, and there are too many copycats out there. I get it that there are color combinations that you really like and you really love, but I'm sure that you will figure out a color combination that you will also like. Please understand that there's some information that I will not share, but anyway, I still want to share my designs with you, so that if you want to make them on your own, that you can do that with the beads that you can buy online or in your local bead shop. So for this bracelet I will use sterling silver supplies, some lobster clasps, and then some tiny jump rings. I think they're about 3mm or 4 at max, and also an extension chain. I'm actually not sure what I will do with this bracelet that I make today. I don't even know whether I will like it. I just decided to make this bracelet so that I can show you the technique and how to start and how I finish it and how I secure the thread, as always. Okay, so those are all the metal supplies. Then for the thread I will use Miyuki beading thread, which is Nymo in size B. And the silver color because I use sterling silver supplies, but that's really your choice. I decided to use rainbow colors, or more like LGBTQ colors. So these are pretty vibrant and they are all transparent and lustered. And for the outer bead row I will use Miyuki 15-0 round beads in matte black. So I will use 6 colors of Miyuki Delica 11-0 beads, 1 color of Miyuki round beads 15-0, So for one of my filled herringbone stitch bracelets I usually need about 3 arm length of thread for about 17 centimeters of length. So I cut 3 arm length of thread. And I usually use a size 10 beading needle. First you thread your needle. After we're done with the length of the bracelet and adding this end of the bracelet, we will then need to go back and finish this end. So we will need to leave a little bit of thread to work with so that we can add the brick stitch part after we're done with the rest. So I would say if you make a herringbone stitch bracelet of 6 beads next to each other, I would leave about 20 centimeters. It's probably a little much, but I would leave 20 centimeters to work with. So you will place your fingers here and you will hold this position of your thread so that you know that you have some thread left over for finishing your bracelet later on. So we will start this bracelet by making one base row of beads next to each other. So I will make one row of beads with all of these 6 beads placed next to each other, the same way that I start a brick stitch. Like this. So you take up 2 beads and then you go back through the very first bead and you place them next to each other. Like this. Then you go back down through that second bead. Then you take up the next bead. In my case it's yellow. And you've got 3 beads next to each other and you go up through that yellow bead. Then take up the next bead. You go from bottom to the top through that 3rd bead. And you place that 4th bead right next to the 3rd bead. You go back down. Take up your next bead. Go down through that 4th bead. Like this. Up again. And then I add my last and 6th bead. And you go down through that last bead. Don't lose tension with your thread because then your very first row of beads will get all wobbly, but you want it straight. Otherwise it will look irregular. Okay, so now we're coming out of the last bead. So we will start with the herringbone stitch by taking up 2 beads and placing them right on top of that very first row of beads. So in my case, I take up a purple bead and a blue bead. I'm coming out of the last bead and I'm going back through that blue bead so that both new beads sit right on top of the very first row, and also 2 beads. Like this. You can see that they are sitting at an angle. Then you go back up through that green bead, or 4th bead in your case, and you take up your 4th color and your 3rd color, and I go back down through the 3rd bead of that row. Go back up through that 2nd bead, You take up your second color and your first color. You go back down through that first bead. Now you can already see that you have your very first row of herringbone stitch. So what you have seen before is that I usually add beads to the edges of my bracelet. You don't have to do this, you can do this without beads, but then people will see the thread. It really just depends on whether you like it that way or you don't. What you can also do is you use the same beads you use for the main part of your bracelet to hide away the thread. But in my case, I choose to use smaller beads, in this case 15-0 Milky round beads. So I will take up 2, I turn it over, so we're now coming out at the bottom of that first red bead. And now I've taken up 2 round beads and I go up through that red bead in the second row. So your first bead in the second row basically. And you pull. Now you've added those decorative round beads and you can't see the thread. So now I will add another row of beads by taking up my first color and the second color. I go down through that second bead, but only one row, not all the way. And they are placed right on top. And then you go up through your third bead in the second row. You adjust the angle a little. You take up your next beads, the third color and the fourth color. Go back down through the fourth bead of your second row. You go back up through the fifth bead on the second row. Take up your fifth bead and your sixth bead of that row, and you go back down through the sixth bead on your second row. Then I take up 2 of those round beads so that I can add them to the edge. So I turn it over. I currently come out of that second row, out of the last bead. Then I go back up through that purple bead on the third row. Like this. And again, I take up all the beads that I want to add to the fourth row. You take up 2 beads and you go back down through the fifth bead. You go up again through the fourth bead. Take up 2 beads again. You go back down through the third bead. and back up through the second bead on the third row. Then 2 beads again, and you go back down through that first row of beads. And you go back down through the very first row. Turn it over. I take up 2 of those round beads and I go back up through that very first bead on the next row. And then you will just continue like this until you reach the length that you want. So this is the whole length I just beaded, and my working thread is getting a little short, so that's why I'm going to bead the end now so that I can add the clasp and the thread is not getting too short. So you can see that I'm at the start of my very last row, so I just added those 2 round beads. And I'm coming out of the first bead of that last row. And what I want to do now is that I want to form kind of a straight line like I have down here. So it looks like the very first base row you usually bead. And for this, I'm going to straighten all these beads of the very last row. So you go, without taking up any beads, you go through that second bead of that row and you form little loops. You go back up through that very first bead and you pull, and they begin to sit a little straighter next to each other. Go back through that second bead, then you go up through that third bead and down through that second bead, and you pull tight and back up again through the third bead down through that fourth bead, up again through that third bead, back down again, go up through the fifth bead, make another loop, up again, down through that last bead, now so that we go up with that last bead, you go one further down, up through that bead next to it, and you don't pull too tight so that you don't straighten so much the beads on the second last row. Okay, so now we're coming out of that red bead. And I will now continue with a brick stitch. If you don't know how that brick stitch works, please check out the other tutorial for it. But I will now bead a little triangle with the brick stitch technique, and then I will add the wire guard and the extension chain and clasp. So I take up 2 beads, and I make a tight stitch. Take up 1 bead, so now we have a pointy end. And this is where I will add the wire guards. It's exactly the same way I showed it in the brick stitch tutorial. So place your thread on that wire guard. You go further down by 1 row and up again. And I pass through that wire guard a 3rd time, just to be safe. And now you weave in the working thread. going to make a loop here. You can see my thread is getting super short. You don't want to weave in your thread into your herringbone stitch because it's a very loose stitch. You would see all the places where you pull your thread too tight. So we stay in the upper part in that brick stitch. Okay, now it's all nice and secure. As always with a brick stitch, we don't tie any knots. We just weave it in and then cut the thread. And this is the first end. So colorful and shiny. And we do the exact same thing with the other end. So you thread your needle. So here we have the same problem, that we are coming out of the bead down below and not on the upper part. So again, you go down one row, and you go back up through that bead next to the red bead, or through that second bead. You don't pull too tight, you only pull gently, and then you go back up through that first bead, and then you brick stitch the second end. So I finished both ends, as you can see, and yeah, that's basically the herringbone stitch. Very smooth, very flexible. I like it a lot. Of course, this is only the super simple basic stitch, but as I've shown you in the beginning of the video, this stitch is super versatile. You can use it for so many different things. You can also use it in earrings. It doesn't need to be bracelets. And I think it's quite cute, to be honest. It's also not super wide. It has about this width. I mean, I don't wear bracelets. That's why I didn't add the clasp and the extension chain. This was just an example how to weave in the herringbone stitch. But let me know whether you will try it out, whether you will make a bracelet for yourself, or maybe you just wanted to learn about it so that you can follow all the other tutorials I will post later on about my earrings. So all the earrings I showed, I will post tutorials for them. It just needs a little time, but it's definitely planned. And now that I've shown you the basic herringbone stitch, I will also record the tutorial for my copal bracelets. So that tutorial will probably come out in June, if you would like to learn that one. And if you're interested in buying, please check out the link down below to my Etsy shop. You can find so many different earrings, bracelets and jewelry sets there. I have a pretty wide range by now, and you can also find all the links to my social media down below. And yeah, if you found this little tutorial helpful, consider liking and commenting. Let me know whether you will try this technique. Maybe also subscribe for any future tutorials on basic beading techniques or jewelry designs, but I also post studio vlogs and other chatty videos about my small handmade business. So for now, I'm out, and I hope that you will have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!